Today we're going to talk about how to get more ideas or write more songs or have more creative output. My name is Matt Moran. I'm a songwriter based in Los Angeles, and I wanted to cover this idea because this topic has come up on a number of discussion forums I take part in, and also when I've spoken to songwriting groups, these questions come up. And it might be framed as something like, how do you get inspired, or how do you get ideas for songs, or how do you complete a song? I start a song and then I can't complete it. It could be any number of those things where the creative process is blocked or stopped. And so it got me thinking about my ideas on creativity, and I wanted to offer some strategies that I think would be helpful if you're interested in upping your creative output. Now, first I want to address this. I don't believe that songwriting is a mystical exercise. So this may run counter to what you've heard from other songwriters or what you believe, and that's okay. I think what I cover will prove helpful even if you believe songs are out in the ether and you put out an antenna and you're kind of receiving this input from God or the cosmos or a mystical place. I don't believe that. I believe that songwriting is an exercise in kind of neurons firing and synapses and environmental factors, meaning experiences you have, things you see, experiences you haven't had but you just imagined. Songwriting occurs inside your brain. And because of that, because I believe that you can control or at least strongly influence your creative output. And so I'm going to make the case that that's true, and I'm going to point to a couple ideas. One is going to be anecdotal, and one is going to be something that we see out in the world with the most prolific creators. And I'm also going to point to, once again, I've mentioned several times Stephen King's book On Writing, a memoir of the craft. I strongly recommend it for anyone who's doing creative output. You could be a songwriter, you could be a writer, you could be an artist, doesn't really matter. Some of what he covers is so pragmatic when it comes to, let's call it forcing creativity, right? So he believes that you should have a time and a place every day that you schedule your creativity. And we're going to talk about that more in just a minute. And he kind of dismisses the whole idea of, you're waiting for inspiration or waiting for your muse to inspire you. His take is set a time and a place every day, and so your muse knows where to find you. And if your muse doesn't show up, at least you did the work, right? So we're going to cover these ideas, these strategies that I use, and you might find helpful. I've written 2 books that were published by Pearson, major publisher, and what I'm going to tell you is they gave me a schedule. I worked with a number of editors. I was responsible to turn in work. There was a schedule, which I often didn't meet, by the way. But the reason I didn't meet it had nothing to do with the lack of inspiration. It had to do with me sitting down and doing the work. So one thing I want to tell you is that when you're writing professionally and you have a schedule, your editor doesn't care about your inspiration. Your editor is not saying, just turn this in when you feel inspired. You're required to turn in the work so that they have a production schedule that they meet so they can output that creative work. And it doesn't matter whether it's a nonfiction book or it's a fiction book. All of that type of writing takes creative process. And so, once again, they didn't wait for my inspiration. They had a schedule that they had to keep to, and it was my job to keep to that schedule. It was my job to find or create the inspiration. I'm going to give another example as well, and that's nighttime talk shows. So, for nighttime talk shows, the host typically delivers a monologue at the start of the show, and he or she are covering topics that occurred many times that day. They're writing up to the moment. Now imagine if you're a writer, you're hired to deliver this, comedic content for the monologue every single day. And if they walk into the writer's room and they say, what do you got for me? What kind of jokes? What can we put up here? And you say, I wasn't feeling inspired, so I don't have anything. You're not going to be working there very long. So try and think of creativity from the standpoint of being a professional hired to deliver on demand. And so these techniques I talk about are going to help you look at creativity that way and hopefully be able to adopt some of them and make your creative process a little more predictable. So we're going to cover 4 ideas. The first one is going to be turn off interruptions. Interruptions are a huge hindrance to flow state. And if you're unfamiliar with flow state, Google it, look it up. But flow state, it's talked a lot about in programming circles. If you're a programmer, and I'm a programmer, you want to get into a state where you're so focused on the code and the problem solving that no other interruptions come in and distract you. The creative process, I believe, is like that you want to turn off interruptions. So if you're flipping through, you have messages coming in and notifications from, I don't know, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, whatever it is, text messages, any of those things, they're going to break flow state. And while it seems like it might just be a 30-second interruption, I'm going to respond to this text message, the reality is it takes anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to get into a flow state, and you'll get better at it if you practice it. But every interruption is not the time of the interruption. It's the time of the interruption plus what it takes to get back into flow state. And so interruptions kill flow state. You want to turn off interruptions. I put my phone into airplane mode, and we'll talk a little bit more about what my process is at the very end of this. So that's the first thing. Turn off all interruptions. The second idea is to schedule creative time. So back to what Stephen King wrote about. Have a time and a place every day that you do your creative work. And it does a couple things. One, that's when you know you're turning off all interruptions. Your mind will start to get ready for that. It will know that you're going to do something at a specific time. And that's going to help you learn to get into a flow state faster. But also, I believe, if we believe in this external muse, this magical, mystical thing that occurs, once again, you're just preparing your mind, your soul, whatever you believe does that, and to be ready for that, to be open to that, right? Now, once again, I believe it's just a exercise in synapses and neurons and things that we generate inside our head. But either way, have a time and a place that you sit down to do creative input. And that doesn't mean, or creative output, that doesn't mean you won't have moments of inspiration that fall outside of that. You might. I had the other morning, I woke up, I wasn't planning on writing anything. I talked about it in a previous video where I wrote a song in eulogy for my friend Tim, and I had no concept or no idea that I was going to write something that day. And so I was just playing around on guitar, and suddenly what I was playing seemed to fit a certain mood, and the words came very quickly. I wrote the entire song in about an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. And so that can happen, and that's great. Take advantage of those moments, but also be willing to schedule time for your creative output. Third item, give yourself a deadline. Now, if you're like me, you probably went through school oftentimes not turning in work in a timely manner, or not getting the work done prior, and then suddenly the night before a project is due, you do this wild cram session where you start at, 8 o'clock at night and you work all night, and what you produce might have been great. Maybe sometimes it wasn't, but a lot of times it was probably pretty good. Well, creating a deadline is like that. If you force yourself, if you say, look, I'm going to complete this song by 10 o'clock this morning, and you sit down, or whenever you decide that you want to schedule your time, I'm a morning person, but you say, I'm going to finish it by this time, it's going to force you to turn off all interruptions, get totally focused. Doesn't mean you can't go back and edit and change things. That's totally cool. But get it done. Force yourself to work on a deadline. It's hugely beneficial. And the last item that we're going to talk about is this idea of committing to creating first, consuming later. Okay, so Gandhi has a quote where he said, and this has been said in many different ways, but action expresses priorities. Meaning, the things that you focus on, where you put your attention, shows what's important to you. And if you're spending more time watching TikTok videos or YouTube videos or any other creative output, more time than you put into your own creativity, you're basically saying that creative output is more important than my creative output. I'd say give yourself more respect. Put your creative output as the most important thing. Create first, consume later. Or consume never, if that's what it means, right? If you have limited time, it's far more important to you, or to me, and it should be more important to you that you focus your time and attention on your creativity, not on someone else's. And so in summary, I'm going to talk about what this means to me. I've got limited time. I've got clients I work for and a lot of things going on. And so my commitment is that I said I'm going to commit 1 hour a day minimum in the morning to creative output. Could be creating a video like this, could be recording a song or adding to a recording, could be writing, whatever it is, I'm committing 1 hour every morning minimum to my creative output. And what that means, if we just look at the numbers, it means that 1 hour a day is going to equal 7 hours a week. That's going to be about 30 hours or so a month, give or take, depending on the month, right? So 30 some odd hours, whatever, 365 hours in a year. Now let's think about 365 hours of creative work, right? If we divide that by a 40-hour work week, that's more than 9 full-time work weeks. And so my question to you is, are you giving your creativity, your creative output, your creative expression, are you giving it 9 full-time work weeks? If you had 9 full-time work weeks to work on creative projects, what would you produce? And so I want you to kind of brutally assess your time and say, am I giving myself and my creative output the attention it deserves? Because 9 full-time weeks seems like a lot of time. And so you have to really kind of go, oh, am I doing that? And if not, are you going to change it? So that's my commitment. I'd love to know if you have some scheduled time that you do creativity. You could leave a comment. Or if you don't, are you going to change that? Do you want to change that? If you have any questions on any of the things I covered, then put that in the comments as well. And of course, if you can subscribe, that would be awesome. If you could like the video, share it with another creative friend, that would be great as well. And I appreciate you so much for tuning in.